was. I was hearing a little voice down the end of my earphones. Right. Okay, let's try to jiggle that a bit.
Fine, we are here, the four of us right now. It's like 9 minutes to the show for today. It's Bri, Melina, and then we've got Louise, we've got Prakash. We are the usual suspects, but what changes this week is the author, is Bri. And for a change, we're going to have Melina Palmer. She runs a fantastic podcast. Today, I think we're going to have her drive the entire Q&A sessions, the discussions, more than Q&A, the discussion with the author. And that's going to be fun, right? Let's wait up till people join in.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, what's been up with you? I saw someone got on a fantastic podcast.
Oh, yeah, you're very good. You're very good to send that message. Yeah, it was just really great fun chatting with her. And I suppose it helped that, you know, we'd already been sort of messaging back and forth. And so it felt, you know, just like a chat, which was really nice.
Yeah. So she's got a good voice. There's no doubt about it. She's got a fantastic.
No doubt about it. She's got the pod voice. I think she knows that.
Oh, she does. She does. Like I tried calling her number, and if you leave, I reach a voicemail, right? And on the voicemail also she identifies herself like, you know, hello, you've reached the number of blah, blah, blah. And so, you know, the host for the brainy business and all of that. So yeah, she knows it. She knows it. All the nice compliments about it from people all over the world. So it's something she pretty much knows, and it's like, you know, she's happy about it, I'm sure. We'll find out more as she joins in. It'll be nice to know her story. How did she start?
Yeah.
In fact, there is one thing that we should start doing slowly when we now, as we have, you know, we spoke about this earlier, right? As we kind of finish up our list of speakers, we start also now getting a lot more diverse set of people. We get people who run podcast hosts. What is their story? How did they get into their podcasting business? What is their podcasting taught them about behavioral sciences? So that becomes one way to go about it. It'll also be nice to get in people who design products, like hardcore product managers and all, but tied all down to behavioral science. You know, as usual, we'll explore that, I think, towards the end of the year. For now, the entire calendar is booked, and we'll
have to start doing Wednesdays as well. We'll have a Wednesday theme and a Saturday theme.
That is there. Yeah, it's gonna become like people drop everything. Eventually, it becomes a university. It's a weekend.
Yeah. It's just like, sure, we'll just broadcast every day.
All right. Well, I got a couple of news, fantastic news. On the panel side, a lot of fantastic people have, you know, confirmed their participation. I think so. The schedule is going to go up today evening or tomorrow.
Oh,
That 3 day schedule, right? What has now gone up also is the speakers list.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's a brilliant list. And everyone I'm talking to, I'm saying about how it's so diverse. It's really great that people who we wouldn't normally get to hear. So it's fabulous.
So we got Guy.
Cool. Yeah, I looked loads of these people up. It's so great to be exposed to so many new people. And do you think you'll be ready to put the schedule up tonight, did you say?
Yes, tonight or tomorrow is going to be up. And,
brilliant.
There are 2-3 slots which we are just about trying. We've kept them open for last minute changes. You never know when you organize something like this. There are always people reaching at last moment. So, but we'll put them as to be announced. And so the rest of it kind of, I think we'll just go up straight up. So you got Kai. All right. Yeah. And then we got Sudhir. Sudhir is he should be actually, I think, declared a national treasure. That's what I believe about him. So the 21 books, so 26 books, and I think they've been translated to some 26 languages. So that's
and Prakash, the thing about Sudhir is that, like, I read his name, I was like, I just don't know this guy. And then when you start reading about him, you're like, how do you not know about this guy? He's amazing.
It's amazing. Fantastic mind out there. And then we have Channing Jang.
Fabulous.
We have got the host. We got the, you know what? This is all gonna go away. We have Bri already here with us. All right, let's stop this.
Tune into all the secret business that happens.
Yeah, absolutely, the secret pre-chat.
I can leave you to it if you like. I've got to.
Not at all. 3 minutes. 3 minutes to count down, so we're okay.
Okay. I do have to go and get new batteries. I'll be a minute.
Okay, no worries.
All right, let me get back to my screen sharing business.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, folks, this is a
Hi,
live.
Melina. Hi, Rachel. Oh, yeah, brilliant. Oh, yeah, great to have Jess along. Lovely. How many speakers have you got in total, Prakash?
We've got around 55 speakers.
Oh, my God, that's amazing.
It's 3 days. And
that's amazing.
The list is insane. So I'm looking forward to Rajesh's sessions. Personally, he is a fantastic mind. Then we've got Ankur Wariko. He is pretty popular, almost some 800,000 followers, I think, on LinkedIn.
Oh my God.
He is a rock star. He's a rock star, legit rock star out there. This guy has founded companies. He has done them, taken them public, made a lot of money, then gone on to say, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get fit. I'm going to get a 6-pack stomach. he actually is. He does stuff like that. Okay, he's really cool.
Yeah.
Then we got Carlos from IADB. He looks after the Latin American side from a behavioral economist point of view with IADB. We got Howley, is the world's #1 deepfakes expert. So we have got him, who's going to talk about the future of societies as deepfakes become more and more popular, more and more prevalent, like the TikTok videos. Lorenzo from Brazil. Prince Guman is going to be talking about.
Oh, cool. He's coming on. He's coming here as well. He's coming to us. Yeah, we're talking
from
to
Nepal. We barely get to hear what's Nepal doing on behavioral economics. So Jaya is going to talk about that.
That's cool.
Fadi Mak is going to talk about Lebanon, what's happening in Lebanon and Kuwait, the Middle East. Neela is going to talk about how do you set up nudge units. Flavia is going to talk about what's happening in Brazil, right? And then you got Pedro is going to talk about what's happening in Peru.
Okay, you've got 1 minute, Prakash, because we're going live.
All right, VM is going to talk about Saudi Arabia, Sonal from Chicago, Steve is from the Caribbean, right? Ambara from South Africa, Nicholas from in Australia, there's Cass, and it just is insane.
It's just absolutely brilliant. Well, I hope none of them have written books, because otherwise I'll have to create an avatar of myself.
Well, all right. Bri, thank you so much. You were patient while we were fooling around out there.
Oh, that's okay. Hi, Prakash.
All right. I think we're going to, Melina is here too. Fantastic. So we got Melina, hi. All right. Louise, all yours.
Okay, so welcome everybody to Behavioural Science Club. You're all very welcome. I'd ask as many of you who can to turn on your cameras, to check your mics are off in case the dog runs in or somebody asks for a biscuit. And I'd like to see all your faces popping up. You're all very welcome today. We are talking with Bri Williams, and we have the assistance today of the podcast host, Melina Palmer of Brainy Business, and Prakash will be contributing later on. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Bri. Thank you very much for coming along. Thank you to speak with all our members today. And Bri, the book we're going to be talking about is Behavioural Economics for Business. And so Bri is going to tell us why relying on what customers tell you will doom your business to fail and what to do instead. The big ask, Bri. She tells us about 3 mistaken assumptions and barriers to change. There's so much in this book. And what I really liked about it was it's broken quite cleanly into 2 halves. So the first half, part 1, is called Business is About Changing Behavior, and it addresses the 3 main things that Bri says are the problems, the barriers to change: apathy, paralysis, and anxiety. So it's fantastic for the theory. And then the other half of the book is applied behavioral economics, and it's just fantastic for all the different case studies. You can glance down and you could be a website owner. You'd be going, oh great, that's a chapter for me, how to improve my website design. You could be in HR and you go to the people management section. There's pricing. There's just so much. It's a really versatile and practical book. So Bri, you're very welcome. Maybe you'd just like to tell us, first of all, before I hand over to Melina to really get into the gritty bits, just to tell us about why you decided to write this book. And also you'll tell us a little bit about deciding to self-publish.
Thank you for that introduction, Louise, and thank you for having me. And a big thank you to everyone who's joined around the world at different times. I know particularly Melina, it is midnight or something ridiculous where you are, but thank you for accommodating us in the Southern Hemisphere. It is just after 5 in Melbourne, where I am. We're currently in lockdown, so I can think of nothing better to do on a Saturday afternoon / evening than share ideas about behavioural science. So thank you. So Behavioural Economics for Business, I wrote mainly because it was the book I was looking for. So I was waiting for someone to launch a book that really took the best of behavioural science and boiled it down into what does it mean for me as a layperson in business, because that's sort of the bias I come to it with. So I was waiting a lot. I started my business in 2011 in behavioural science. I wrote this book in 2016, I think, thereabouts. And I've had other books along the way, but it really is the book that I was waiting for someone else to write. And because no one did, I thought, well, let me have a stab. And I had also been writing for Smart Company and continue to write for Smart Company on a regular basis. So I knew I had a lot of material, which is really where the back end of the book is mainly drawn from, because that developed my discipline for, at that stage, it was a weekly basis, poring over the behavioural science and then taking what the science was telling us and interpreting it for a business market. And so that's really where my skills were honed for my business audience. And the front half of the book, as you've described, it's my business model, my behaviour change model. So again, I suppose I came at the issue from the perspective that when I was in the corporate sector, and I had been for 15 years, I was enormously frustrated by having all of these resources, having all of these forms of research at my disposal and still not getting answers. And so that's why I got into the field of behavioural economics, because I thought that was really an area that could provide answers. And then the model itself sort of came to me sort of gradually as I started my business as a way of breaking down what can feel a bit like spaghetti. human behavior can feel very tangled and very confusing. And so I sought and continue to seek to really break it down into manageable concepts and practical applications, because people are busy. They need to sit down and write an email. They need to have a meeting. How are they going to use this sprawling field of behavioural science in order to do that more effectively? So that's how the book came about. And your other question was self-publishing. Do you want me to speak to that? Yeah, so self-publishing gives people like me, well, everyone, a lot of flexibility, creative flexibility. I found it, I use a software called Blurb. So the Blurb model, if you've heard about it, is you get the software for free, and then you write, or you can upload your manuscript into their sort of pro forma templates, and then they publish it on demand. So it's a full service model, and I found it's very finicky in terms of the desktop publishing, but a really low upfront cost compared to, for instance, employing a publisher or seeking a publishing deal. So a really low exposure, low cost way for people to get their ideas in print and control the outputs, and by extension, the marketing. So it has enabled me to publish, I think five or six books, varying in size, and yeah, maintain ownership over the materials and flexibility. So I've really enjoyed the self-publishing model.
That's great. Thanks, Bri. And the opening of the book, talking about the 3 barriers to change. You know, these things should be obvious, but until you sort of read it, you think, oh God, yes, oh God, yes. I mean, apathy, can't be bothered, I'm reading here, paralysis, overwhelmed by decision, or anxiety. I mean, they're all things that, regardless of being in a business situation, they're things that we're all so aware of, that, you know, we're doing all the time with everything, Bri.
That's exactly right. And that's what's so interesting when I'm training people about behaviour change. I often do that through the lens of looking at, for instance, your external customer or your internal customer, so your colleagues. But by the end of that training, of course, the penny drops that, oh, hang on, I'm a human and I'm susceptible to all of these biases, and I am susceptible to apathy, paralysis, and anxiety around any sort of state of change. And so, and part of my work is actually in a habit space and personal effectiveness, because they just partners together so well. So yes, it's very helpful for us to always externalize it and look at the external customer view first. But, you know, it's a giant whacking mirror pointed right back at us to say, actually, this is what's getting in the way of us, for instance, being more effective or less frustrated at work, for instance. So in my training course, one of the tasks that I conclude with is getting my students to look at their own apathy, paralysis and overwhelm as it relates to behaviour change, or as it relates to behavioural techniques. So they've just done this course, they've learned all this good stuff, or they've just read this book. How are you going to change your behaviour so you actually employ what you've just learned?
And just touching on that, Bri, congratulations for the launch of your training course. You must be very pleased. And also, we were just chatting a little bit to get to know each other last week, and we were touching on nudge stock, which is obviously where we're all connected. Tell us just a little bit about your experience after having done that, sort of the exposure in such a large event.
Yeah, it was fabulous. It was really, I was delighted to be involved. I have gotten to know the guys from Ogilvy over the course of years, and the rather small Australian behavioural economics sort of group as well, network. So look, the feedback has just been amazing, and I couldn't have wanted for a better experience, actually. I think what was interesting in terms of the different presentations, and because mine was pre-recorded, which worked out in my favor in a lot of ways. One, I could just be drinking wine as I watched myself and all of the comments come through, which was terrific. But it also enabled me to edit the materials so that it was very fast paced. Because I think, and this is how my course ended up coming out of Nudge Doc, if you like, because I think it's incumbent on practitioners of behavioural science to actually apply behavioural science to the way they present. I don't know if that's too meta, but I'm tuning into a lot of presentations, and those presentations aren't overcoming apathy, paralysis, and anxiety. So I think the opportunity in presentation skills is to use behavioural economics to help shape that. And that's what I've really loved. I really enjoy it. I did feel a little bit nervous because I was wearing funny hats, and I was perhaps less buttoned down or conservative than many of the presentations, but that's actually played in my favour, because I just, I know as an audience member of Nudge Doc myself, it's very hard to maintain people's attention over 14 hours, let alone 1 hour, let alone 10 minutes, but 14 hours. And so I think the rhythm really helped, I think, punctuate the presentation. So no, it's been a fabulous experience.
Yeah, and we love, well, I can't speak for everybody, but I absolutely love your style, Bri, and I love to watch your YouTube videos, and you're right. I mean, I think it makes you stand out, and we're all into being true to ourselves in this group, so we absolutely love that. So thanks very much for that introduction, Bri. I'm just going to hand over now to Prakash, my co-host, who'll have a little chat with you, and then we'll be moving over to Melina. So thanks very much, Bri.
Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. I think Prakash will be keeping quiet today. It's going to be lovely ladies who's going to speak. Melina is out here. We're very lucky. Bri, I think Prakash will just shut up and listen to them talk. Melina, all yours.
Oh, well, all right.
There you go, Melina.
I feel like I missed something in someone told you not to talk, or I don't know, but that wasn't me. I did not demand. I talk a lot, but I did not demand that Prakash not speak, so I would have more time. So, Bri, it's so great to see you. I know we've been sort of saying hello on the socials, it feels like, for a while now, so it's nice to actually be here at the same time. I really enjoyed reading the book, and I think you had some really cool, there were a few quotes that stood out to me so much that I love the phrasing that you used in them. And so I am intrigued and want to just sort of put them out there and see, we never know how far anyone else has gotten in the book yet. But one of my favorite ones was really early on, actually, just saying that infobesity leaves us starved of answers is just so telling and such a fun phrasing. So I'm just kind of curious where that came, how that even came about for you, and some of those other kind of fun quotes. Do you have things that people come and just say to you when they meet you that it's like the thing that resonates with them, that they've heard you say a million times or read in blog posts or whatever that is?
Not so much. And it was funny because I had to have a look at the book today because it's been a while since I've picked it up. But that one stuck out to me as well, Melina. So it's interesting. Infobesity, I think it came about, it was through a Smart Company blog, I think, from memory. But it's just this function of, there's no dearth of information out there. There's no shortage of things we can draw upon. And yet, and that was my experience in the corporate sector, didn't give me answers. And it was enormously frustrating. So, and it seems that the modern age at the moment, where more is assumed to be better. And of course, we know that that isn't the case. And information is the same in that regard. So people can get further away from the answer the more information they seem to get. So you start to drown in it rather than getting clarity. So I think that's where infobesity came from.
Yeah. Well, I think too, like these days, and in the time, I would say pretty heavily, probably in the time since you wrote the book, and probably even before that, where, that kind of big data was the theme of every conference anywhere. Like it's what everybody was talking about. And when companies would try to go to apply it, you just feel like, well, as soon as we have the numbers, we'll be able to get what we need, right? But it seems like maybe do you have any stories of clients or anything that you've worked with where you're able to say, like, actually, that's not really the case?
Well, I just, in my course, I wrote a little bit about this, so it's sort of fresh in my mind. But I think then I think I cited it in the book as well. But, it was executives were asked in this study to cite how they describe their decision-making style. And the vast majority said they're either data-driven or empirical. So, data related. Only 10% of people said that they were intuitive. And then the follow-up question was, well, if the available data contradicted your gut, what would you do? Oh, well, I'd reanalyze the data, or I'd find more data. So really what people are looking for in data, and this relates to the anxiety section of my behavior change model, they look for data and they look for information as a way of giving them confidence or security. So it's serving a psychological function. Because when I was in the corporate sector and I'd run all these different business cases, and you can make an Excel spreadsheet do anything that you want it to do, right? So cut the numbers this way, cut the numbers that way. And I'd keep going back. Is this what you want? Is this what you want? No, that's not. No, if you could. And so the long story there is that what people are telling us is that they're not comfortable yet. The currency they're using is data. Give me more data. When in actual fact, what they're looking for is a sense of assurance. Nothing to fear about agreeing, for instance, to the business case, or nothing to fear about taking the action. So I think that's my perspective on data, that if you view it as not a cry for help, maybe it is a cry for help, but it's a form of currency rather than necessarily the answer they're seeking. I think that can open up people's perspective on the resistance they're encountering.
Right. Yeah, it's the system two's word for where it doesn't really understand what's going on with system one. It's something that I can say that is wrong. And, I think that Louise talked about your main three pieces, and I know you were talking about anxiety. So there's the apathy, paralysis, and anxiety. Do you want to talk a little bit about those three? And I know, like you said in the book, that there's not necessarily, it's not that all three have to be present. It's not that you can only have one at a time. But one of the questions that I had too is, even if somebody is trying to uncover, like in this case where someone's saying the numbers don't support it or whatever it is, and maybe that's their confirmation bias, but they're throwing up flags no matter what you're asking for and saying like, no. So something is actually going on behind the scenes. Is one of these, the apathy, paralysis, or anxiety, the most common culprit, like a place where you'd want to start, or the most burdensome, difficult to overcome, that you would recommend as a place to start for someone who's dealing with this with people they're trying to work with?
Yeah, great question. And so firstly, I'll just cover off the language shift between, for instance, Nudge Doc, if people have seen that, and my course. I tend to use the less formal language of lazy, scared, and overwhelmed. So lazy is apathy. Scared is anxiety, and overwhelmed is overwhelmed or paralysis. So I tend to just use, depending on the, for instance, client base that I'm dealing with. So in a formal setting, I'll talk about apathy, paralysis, and anxiety, because that sounds like I've got my sensible shoes on. Whereas when I'm having a more free-flowing conversation, I tend to use lazy, scared, and overwhelmed, because that seems to capture people's attention and has a little bit of humor around it. So if I interchange those terms, that's why. Now, in terms of the model, so it's a triangle model. I've actually, see, I've worn my model on my chest because, you know, why not? So apathy comes first, so lazy. And that's really a function of our first task usually in any endeavor is trying to get people's attention, trying to get them engaged. And so that's where it naturally sits at the bottom of the triangle as sort of the lead block or barrier. Then we work through overwhelm or paralysis, because the tendency often when we're engaging people is to throw at them a lot of content, a lot of answers, a lot of information. And so then they get choice paralysis. So that becomes an issue. And then anxiety or scared is the very tippy top of the triangle, because usually it's very close to the tipping point of whether this is a yes or a no, whether they're going to move from their current behavior to the desired behavior. So that's why it's structured the way it is. Now, in answer to your question, you will find at different points during the interaction that you're having. Now, an interaction could be long, so taking a customer through a customer journey, for instance, you might find that apathy tends to be the big issue at the start, and then anxiety comes to bear when you're putting the contract in front of them. But the important thing as you are interrogating any sort of process where you are trying to change people's behavior is to not limit yourself and go, okay, I've done the triangle and apathy is the issue, locked and loaded, never have to revisit this. Because really it's a series of triangles. I'm getting them from this point to that point. So on a website, which is a good sort of metaphor for any sort of other behavior change that you're looking at, you know, getting them to the site, that's going to be one behavior change. Getting them from the home page to the next page is another behavior change. Getting them to finally click to buy, that's another behavior change point. So the trick with this is whenever you are working through an interaction with either customers or a customer, so an individual or a group of people, is to always think lazy, scared, and overwhelmed. Lazy, scared, and overwhelmed. Am I making sure neither or none of those barriers is at play here? And it almost becomes like an audit that you do at different points. So if I'm writing them an email, how do I make sure I'm covering off apathy? So for instance, subject line, how am I going to get them interested enough to click on this? How do I make sure in an email I don't overwhelm them with multiple calls to action? How do I make sure they think it's a credible email so it doesn't look like spam, but also I'm giving them something to fear if they don't take action, because otherwise they'll just ignore it. So my aim is for people, once they've transferred this information, is to, at any juncture in their day, whenever they're doing a task they're already doing, because everything in business is about behavior change, that they draw themselves a little triangle, and that cues them to think through apathy, paralysis, anxiety, or lazy, scared, and overwhelmed. So it just becomes habituated and it flushes out any resistance they might be experiencing.
Yeah, definitely. While you were talking, it brought up for me one of the other the other big quote of a thing where when I read it, they're those like I haven't seen it phrased this way, but it's so obvious when you see it. And I love coming across those in any of these, you know, books and research and things. And so every business on the face of the planet, I think, probably says and thinks that churn of customers is like a normal state that we all have to deal with. Like people are always going to be leaving, and it's just what they do. And that for you saying customers leaving is unnatural, like due to status quo bias, this is not something that people should do unless you're doing something wrong, right? Like if people are looking to leave, you're messing up somewhere, right? So I mean that is so obvious.
I love what you're picking up on, because it dawned on me at some point, because everyone is talking about churn, and there's an acceptance that same with conversion. We accept that we don't have high conversion on our websites. We accept that customers churn. Well, if everything is telling us that the natural state of human behavior is inertia, we tend to stick with the knitting, we tend to stick with the devil we know, we're lazy, cognitively lazy, then you've really got to do something pretty bad for people to churn. And that should be damning. That should be really, people should think that they're in crisis if customers are churning. And yet there is a tolerance, and it just becomes sort of the conventions of business that we all sort of, maybe it's the dirty laundry of business. We don't want to sort of out ourselves as having these sorts of problems. but I think it is an interesting, turn, looking at it from a different way. It's unnatural for a customer to leave you.
So would you think, and I don't know if this is something that you do a lot of work in with your clients over the years, but I mean, would you say that that is an issue in the selling process? Like you oversold and, for what they were going to get, or that you weren't really clear in explaining, so you weren't properly setting expectations? Or is it just that, in the day-to-day, the value isn't living up to kind of the price point of what was expected?
I think the cue is when perhaps the churn occurs. So if it's happening pretty immediately, that means you've got an expectation gap, as you were saying. So people are probably, hang on, this isn't delivering what I expected it would. And they're going to be angry, and they're going to take action. So that's going to happen pretty quickly. And then there's usually other points of churn, which is more around renewal times or price increases. So they're your sort of cues. A lot of businesses track, for instance, engagement. So if people are using the product on a regular basis, or whether they're coming in or out as sort of lead measures, I suppose, for churn. But I think oftentimes there's an opportunity for businesses to get better at those moments of interaction that should be reminding people of the value. Oftentimes in banks, for instance, we hear, they've taken me for granted. This is my whole problem with loyalty. Businesses think people are loyal, and I don't think they're loyal. I think they're lazy. I don't see people. Yeah, it's very rare for a person to be loyal, and yet, so I think businesses need to look at habit building rather than loyalty as an aside. But yes, I think paying more attention to those points of interaction that you're having with a customer along the way, reminding them maybe quite subtly of the value. I know, for instance, some of my software, whether it was MailChimp or whichever service I was using, they always, with the monthly bill, it was like, processed without a hitch. They were using positive language to reaffirm the relationship. Even though it was around a pain point, which was, I'm paying them money, but they were doing it quite subtly. And so they're building up that sort of, the relationship in a positive way.
Yeah. So funny enough, I had made a note while I was reading the book where in the piece about loyalty programs, you had said and there's a conversation for another day about where it's more about habit building than it is about loyalty, to where I thought maybe today is the day for that conversation. So do you have anything that you want to say about loyalty programs versus building habits?
Well, I think loyalty programs, again, I think it's a falsehood for a business to think that they're going to own the hearts. The hearts and minds, I think, is how I expressed it in terms of loyalty. Whereas I think what you should be interested in, the hands and feet, rather than the hearts and minds. Hearts and minds is an emotional connection, which I think is really high bar when you're talking about a product. Now, of course, you'll get a segment of your customers that may be absolutely passionate about you, and Apple, or I'm using a Rode microphone. I think that's got people are very passionate about, you know, particular technologies and what have you. But that's the tiny little bit of the customer base.
But that's habit-based too, right? It's because you know how to use it. Like, I don't want to switch off of an Apple because, you know, I'm used to.
Apple are an amazing case study, aren't they, in so many ways, because they've developed this whole ecosystem. And so it's very then hard to break out of that. So even if I want a Samsung, I can't. And I wouldn't say I'm loyal to Apple. There are too many barriers to exit for me.
Right.
And so the effort is greater than the reward for leaving. So as much as I hear about these other tablets or whatever that are probably, they could be better technology, because I'm now locked in this ecosystem, you know, they've got me.
Right.
So, yeah, so habituating product really means that you're concentrating on what customers are doing on a regular basis. Loyalty, again, I feel is sort of a falsehood. You're aiming too high and aiming for stuff that, yeah, when it's in the emotional space, it's very difficult, particularly for most products, which are more transactional.
Right. Yeah. So I know we've got some questions that are in the chat here now, and one of them ties in with so I had a note about, you were talking about, you know, the book has a section about the perfect pitch, and being good at pitching yourself. And this question here is asking for, how has knowledge of behavioral economics helped you improve your presentation pitches to tough audiences? And, you know, what are your top 3 hacks for that?
Yeah, so I can't remember if I wrote about this in the book. I think I did, but I certainly have done it in the course. Some early feedback I got in my consulting career, this potential client had seen me present in a seminar, was excited about what I was doing. And then I put a proposal forward to do some consulting work, and she gave me the feedback that I didn't walk my talk. And that was such a kick in the guts, because I was like, in other words, I wasn't using behavioral techniques in the way I was approaching that interaction. It was the best feedback I could have ever received, really. It was early on in my consulting career, so I'd left the corporate sector. I didn't really know what I was doing. And from then on, I look at every presentation or proposal as an opportunity to change behavior. So from a no to a yes, how am I going to engage them? So how do I overcome apathy? How do I overcome overwhelm? So making sure I'm not giving them too many options. And how do I give them nothing to fear if they do take action, but something to fear if they don't? So that's the sort of the mantra that runs through my business. Now, my presentations and the book, you'll notice that I start from the problem state. So I start with flawed assumptions around how people behave. Now, I need to do that in order to whet people's appetite, in order to get people out of their own inertia or status quo about how they believe humans behave and how they roll in their business, how they, you know, interact with people. I firstly have to create a tension about what's wrong and get them to agree to that. It's like, oh, yes, say versus do. Oh, yes, I've seen that. I've done that. Now we've got an appetite to then put more information in and start to change the thinking around that. So I guess my advice when you are presenting is that you need to create a problem state that the person you're presenting to can agree to. No good coming at it completely left field and being either so far out that they don't know what planet you're on, or so confronting that you'll just get reactance. You need to couch it in such a way that they are reflecting on their own world and going, oh, yes. Now they're leaning into, well, how do we resolve that? So that's where I would start in terms of presentation structure.
Yeah. So, yeah, do you have an example from like with your own revamping process, and maybe now that you've got your new, course set up and everything? So for whenever the next presentation is, and you're wanting to lead people to a particular item, which I'm sure gets aligned with the audience you're speaking to, right? So some is for the consulting, some people you're referring them to just buy the book or get on your list. Sometimes the lead is to get them to join a course or something. How do you have an example of a way that you found a particular, like, you talk about the three act play, sort of like story arc in the presentation. So like, do you have an example of how you've maybe done that yourself that makes it a little bit more concrete for those of us that are intrigued in how you actually would do that? And for, to get to Daria's question too. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I did a presentation for a group in insurance probably 18 months ago now. And it was a session that was around stakeholder influence. And so at the very start of that presentation, I did everything that you could do to make it a very bad presentation. So I had really bad clip art, I had text-heavy slides, I sat down, I didn't make eye contact, I spoke in a monotone, so that, and then I broke character. But I left it long enough for them to start to go, oh God, I've got an itch to just pick up my phone and tune out. And I did that, which was quite risky, so that there would be contrast between what they just experienced and what they were going to experience. But also I got them to actually feel that horrible tension that you feel as an audience member, because the point I was making, of course, to them was if they are trying to influence their stakeholders, most of them are presenting like I just did.
Right.
So many presentations I've been watching have been so deathly boring. And I was I'm talking out of turn now, but I was in a webinar for, an association of learning professionals on how to teach online courses. I seriously thought 10 minutes in, this guy is joking, isn't he? He's going to any moment say, hang on, stop. I've just shown you what not to do. But he didn't. It was actually, so I guess my point is that I often look for an opportunity to interrupt people's assumptions early on so that I'm engaging them, so that apathy isn't necessarily a challenge. Now, that won't necessarily suit everyone, which is why a problem state can probably get you to the same thing, which is, oh, I haven't heard that before. I'm actually going to, because we are so distracted, because we are, in particular in meetings, people have their devices. You're battling to get people's attention and buy-in.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. Thank you for for letting me maybe ask kind of the uncommon question. I love asking uncommon questions. So so another question that was in here, which is I think definitely kind of in the nature of this group, where we end up with stuff that's kind of not just like, so you wrote about this, why is that? But really like extending beyond. And so Shivani had said, I work extensively in the social sector in India, where the challenges are even more basic than lazy, scared, or overwhelmed. For example, women don't even understand the importance of using modern contraceptives. There's a lack of intent to engage in family planning methods. Bri, do you have any thoughts on how behavioral science can be used for intent creation?
Well, intent creation, I think that for me, in my world, would be an apathy issue. So with apathy, what you're really looking, that's the area if you were going to talk about motivation, that's the section that that would fit there. So it fits in the model. Now, if for instance you wanted to work with these people on it, so behavioural techniques aside, I call it the Zorro Technique. It is referred to in the book as getting people to buy in to the, I've forgotten what I actually called it, but it describes 4 questions. So firstly, you ask people, what's good about how things are today? So if it's contraception, well, I don't have to worry about contraception. I don't have to worry about my family or my partner's reactions to that conversation, or I can avoid that conversation. And then you talk about, God, now I've lost it. So concerns about current state. What are the benefits of change?
Mm-hmm.
I've got the order wrong. So concerns about the current state. We wanted 4 questions. Sorry, I'm having a mental blank. I have to draw it. And because you want to end with the benefits of the change. Benefits, concerns. Right. So the second question, after you've asked them about the concerns about, benefits of current state, ask them what the concerns about the current state are. So, well, if I don't take contraception, I'll probably end up with more children, and it means that the financial implications and societal implications, what have you. You're getting these people to answer these questions. Then you talk about the change state. So what concerns do you have about the change state? So what concerns do you have about, for instance, taking contraception? And then they'll give you some reasons around why they're concerned about making the change. And then finally, the final question is, well, what are the benefits of making this change? Because you want to leave them, having gone through that 4-question process, convincing themselves that, oh, of course, the benefits of doing this completely outweigh any downside of changing. They resolve my concerns about not changing, and that completely outweighs the benefits of staying the same. So that's a technique that you might want to use, because that sort of will then drive motivation and increase engagement. So look out for the Zorro Technique. There'll be a blog on it on my website. It is referred to in the book, though, I'm pretty sure. Maybe not under the Zorro Technique name, though.
Awesome. I love, and like ending on the high note, right? So you're walking them through and helping them like discover, where if you would just start and be like, well, what's the benefit of the new thing? They're not ready to answer that question yet. Right. But exactly. I'm sure, Louise, with your market research background, you're like, yeah, that's how you do this.
Yeah, because they're sort of getting to the answer themselves. You're there to facilitate them really flushing out all of the concerns so they feel heard, but they almost answer the question themselves. So that that's an opportunity.
Yeah. So I had made a note about that. You said loss aversion was your favorite concept in the book, which I'm interested if that still rings true. And it ties in with a question here from Sarah Mather, saying, in B2B, what's the most effective application of loss aversion you've come across?
Okay, isn't my favorite? I can't remember saying that. I remember saying it was the most powerful. But,
maybe.
Yeah, I think because it's such a replicated concept. So it's a very robust principle in behavioural science, but it's also that counterintuitive principle where we always think we're going for the win. We think we're going for the gain. And a lot of businesses market that way. And so we always tend to talk to people about the benefits without understanding that we're dragging these people from somewhere and they're having to give something up, even if what they're giving up is less advantageous. I always think about banks this way. So banks might, you know, give us a great interest rate, and yet still we don't switch to them. And that's a lot to do with what the effort that's involved, for instance, or what I might lose psychologically, if not financially, by making the switch. So I've got to change all of my direct debits, and that might stuff up. And I have to go down to payroll, and I have to talk to the payroll manager, and the payroll manager is, you know, nasty. I don't want to talk to them about having to change my bank. So there's a whole lot of stuff that gets wrapped up in these sorts of decisions. In B2B, loss aversion plays out in a very strong way, taking customers aside in terms of the internal decision making. Whenever I think about B2B, trying to get your colleagues to do something, there's a whole lot of unstated anxiety about what this does to them politically, for instance. If we do things in a new way, what's this going to do to my power base? Or is it going to change investment? A classic one, for instance, in end of year budgeting is that if you haven't used your budget, you get less budget next year. And so then people are just, quick, let me buy something. Let me spend some money so I don't want to lose that money, even though it's like, this is mad for the organization. You don't need that, you know? Now, in terms of B2B, often you're working through a procurement, very hard to say, procurement group. You might be doing it through a tender or through a procurement manager or something like that. So oftentimes the decision maker is not necessarily the advocate. You've got to work through a few different people, and what their anxiety is going to be drawn from might be different. So when you're analysing the issue, it's very important to break out your stakeholders in a B2B environment and go, okay, if I'm talking with Joe and Joe is my contact, if I'm selling to Joe, does Joe then have to, who does Joe have to work through in order to get this done? So does Joe have to convince her boss? Does Joe have to convince her team? Does Joe have to talk to the payroll, the procurement manager? So the stakeholders become super important in a B2B environment because, yeah, often there's a lot to B2B environments because the dynamics are different. It's not their money that they're spending, so it's less direct. You have other issues around apathy. So if they're not going to benefit from the product or something, like a procurement manager, they may just be driven by cost. So their metrics are all around cost, or how do I prove to people that I really nailed them on price? Their motivation might be very different from the business unit that you're actually trying to sell the service to, who is not necessarily going to be cost driven, but they want benefits. Yeah, so a lot of different people in play in a decision to purchase in a B2B environment, but you can use the same model. Apathy, paralysis, anxiety, same issues to flush out why particular people might be resistant to and how you can pitch it. So loss aversion in a B2B environment, instead of saying you can save $10,000, you would say you can stop wasting $10,000. So just using the language differently to to have more psychological gravitas. Hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I like psychological gravitas.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Is it?
I can't hear you.
Just lost your volume there, Melina. Can you hear me? Don't worry, I'll take over. Yeah, I'll take over for a bit here now. Yeah, great. So thanks so much, Melina. You've just been a fantastic co-host today and great working your way through the questions. And Bri, what I particularly was interested in was near the start of the book, you opened the conversation about what's been holding back behavioural economics, which is a whole bag in itself altogether, and you touch on the language used. using the word irrational. Would you like to talk a little bit about that, Bri?
Oh, you're testing the memory now. Well, look, it was interesting, I suppose, again, written in 2016, but there still has, to an extent, been a lot of buzz around behavioural economics. And yet my experience, certainly at that time, was that clients were a little slow to take it up. So it was sort of, it hadn't quite seeped in to business as usual. And I still think, I was going to say it's on the fringes. I think it's more progressed than that. One of the challenges, I think, has been a lot of people are saying they're using behavioural economics because they are using it for a marketing expedience. So some advertising agencies or market research agencies saying, oh yeah, we use behavioural economics. And then if you press them on, well, how do you use it? And well, they might throw a few principles at you, but really it's more a marketing exercise than it is.
Yeah, it's sort of like a buzzword rather than understanding. Do you think then you're saying you wrote that in 2016? Do you think that there is a change for the better in this area, Bri?
Well, depends, of course, on what the definition of better is, Louise. But in terms of the uptake, yes, I think it's become more a business as usual requirement almost. There is more use of behavioural economics in common lexicon. So rather than, for instance, me having to describe behavioural economics and the principles in more explicitly in, for instance, blogs, I can sort of jump into the issues really. My own journey with it, for instance, is in the early days. So I started People Patterns in 2011. I was more overt around this is a behavioural principle and this is what the behavioural principle means and this is how you would apply it in business. Now that I think either it's my own comfort with the subject matter or what have you, I almost put the behavioural science to the background. Really, for me, it's around, and my new course is called Influencing Action for that reason, rather than being called Behavioural Economics to Influence Action. Because I think ultimately, I don't really care what field of behavioural science or psychology that you use in order to affect better outcomes for your business. I'm not wedded to the fact that behavioural economics is, a field, although I think it's an excellent one. And I think it was a gap, which I sort of have described in the matrix model of, the future and past behaviour and the observed and self-reported behaviour. There's information on that in the book. So I think, are we getting better? I think it's become more an expectation that businesses use it. I think we're seeing more results and more case studies in the marketplace, which I think is fabulous. And I think I would have hoped, particularly for marketers, and marketers, I still am surprised with that they're not wrapping their arms around behavioural economics and saying, this is our field. I've likened it, whether it's in this book or another, because I'm an accountant as well for my sins. So I did a finance and psychology double. So in finance, you've got a whole range of accounting standards that you can draw on. Now, as a result, no one ever challenges your opinion as an accountant because you say, well, it's the regulation. Whereas marketers and anyone in soft skills, HR, they have to always, they are buffeted by other people's opinion. So the CEO walks in the room, the marketers have decided it needs to be red, the CEO says it needs to be blue. Well, guess what? It's going to be blue. Unless the marketer can say, well, the behavioural science says that we need to use red because ... And so I think there's still so much opportunity from a professional level for marketers particularly to, and researchers, of course, Louise, to put the science at the forefront and reposition their professions so there's a higher barrier to entry so that opinions are not welcome unless they're backed up with the science. I think that's still an opportunity.
Yeah, I love that you've highlighted all of that, Bri, because so many people I'm speaking to who don't have necessarily the professional qualification to call themselves behavioral scientists, behavioral economists, or it may well have been that qualification wasn't around when they studied, or it's still not available everywhere. But they're saying to me, oh, I've kind of been reading a few books and reading these terms, and I'm like, I think I am a behavioral scientist. I just think that's just so funny. And then for others, they'd be like myself, where they'd be like, well, I know what all these things are, and I've kind of, been practicing these things, but I didn't know there was even a term for it. So you can have, on the one hand, almost sort of the fear of it being behavioral science. Like, oh God, it's a science, I'm scared of science. But then on the other hand, it's such a tactile subject as soon as you start learning about it. It's what we're all doing, it's what we're all seeing. It's happening all around us in the supermarket. So, your hands on all the time. I just want to highlight one particular story that made me laugh in your book. And it's when you tell us the example of a cafe story you came across which is a story from France. It says they're tiring of rude customers. It's so funny. And just to explain to everybody, in order to, I can't really get behind the sort of incentive, but the cafe starts putting out 3 different prices. Now, I don't know if these were broadcast, Bri, or if it's a sort of apocryphal, but I've got another funny story that goes with it. So it's a coffee is $7, a coffee please $5. Hello, may I have a coffee please? $3.50. And this so made me roar, because an Italian, my daughter's Italian fiance tells me that in Venice, if the Americans ask for a coffee, that's one price. In English, can I have a coffee? They won't even bother to ask in Italian. And if you ask for your coffee in Italian, which is the formal language, obviously, of the country, then it's one price. But if you ask in Venetian, then that's when you get the €2 coffee.
I think that's almost discriminatory. I wouldn't like to see it. Yeah, I think the example is a good one, because this business was saying, if you just bowl into them and say, coffee. They're going to charge you more than if you say, oh, hi, and have a human exchange. Oh, hi, can I have a coffee? Well, they're going to charge you less. But they were being quite overt about it. And I think that's the secret. You can't necessarily be clandestine when you're using these techniques. But I think central to how I write and how I like to present is that we're all behaviour change experts. People don't turn up to work necessarily thinking that. So accountants turn up to work thinking they're accountants, but no, in order for them to get anything done, they have to work with and through others. And that's for every job. And yet nowhere in our education are we being taught how to influence other people. So that's the screaming gap that I think is what we can best fill, because partly why I left the corporate sector was it was just so demoralizing. And if you commute, well, in the days that you could actually commute on a train, everyone just seems so downcast. So I think the modern age, this is the broader picture, is people are not satisfied in their work. And a large reason I think they're unsatisfied in their work is that it's frustrating. Why is it frustrating? Because you can't easily work with and through others. So that's, I think, where behavioural science can help.
That's fantastic, Bri. I'm very conscious we're getting close to the hour we've been around. So I'm going to just bring in one more question, and I really like this question. It's from Jing, and Jing Riley is touching on as well a film I watched recently. I don't know how many of you have seen the new movie up on Netflix, Social Dilemma, which is fascinating. So Jing says, when we talk about behavioural change, how can we make sure we're doing the right things? and changing people's behavior for the right reason and positive outcome. I don't know if you've seen that movie yet, Bri, but so Jing says, not sure if everyone's watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix. There was footage of BJ Fogg's tiny habit training for Facebook employees, which makes me think, how would viewers see us? The experts are trying to change people's behavior. It's a big subject, isn't it, Bri? You have a big responsibility.
It's spot on, but all of us do. It's an interesting question because, and it is thrown in the way of behavioural science, but because it's like, oh, well, you're trying to influence people. It's like, well, so are you. If you're not using behavioural science, you are still trying to influence people. I get letters from the government that are trying to influence me. Clearly, they're not using behavioural science. So they're ineffective and they're wasting a lot of money around it. Now, there is the element of manipulation, of course, and that's where you need a moral compass, for sure. I think a lot of, well, I haven't watched it yet. I'm a bit terrified too. That's anxiety on my little behaviour change map. But I think maybe a lot of people didn't understand what the implications would be. And I choose to hope that that is the case rather than being, so orchestrated. I know BJ, I did do some training with BJ actually, and it's an amazing educator. But I note also that a lot of his work is almost, whether it's a time-based thing or what have you, but he does a lot of work in the personal effectiveness space, but also in how to overcome societal issues. So whether that's him balancing the ledger, I'm not sure, but I think it is. I do have pause when I think about who I'm working with. So for instance, I don't work with tobacco companies and I don't work with gambling organizations. So I have my choices about who I will and won't work with, because it is absolutely a responsibility. Yes, the triangle wields great power.
The power of Bri's triangle.
That's right. That's right.
And so, yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. We're going to wrap it up. It's 1 o'clock there for Melina, so we'll let you go to bed, Melina. I so want to thank you for contributing to our event this morning. I want to thank you for coming along, Bri, and talking to all of us. Thank all of our members for joining us. It's so great to see all of your faces on the screens, and you come along every week. And just to tell you all that there is no official social club next week. The social club, I'm calling it here. And then when I call it Behavioural Science Club, I think it sounds like chess club after school. But next week is a Now Fest run by Prakash's 1001 Stories, running the 24th, 25th, 26th. I encourage you all to sign in, join that. He's got some amazing speakers signed up, and the thing that's really exciting about it is a lot of them would be people that we wouldn't necessarily have been exposed to before, but are like big deal in their own country. So it's just culturally exposing us to really fantastic people, getting their voices out there, and I hope that you'll all sign in and follow that as much as you can for Prakash's own version of Nudge Stuck. So thank you all so much for coming along. Thank you, Bri. Thank you, Melina. Thank you, all the members. It's great to see you all, and we'll see you here, same space, at our usual time of 4 o'clock in 2 weeks. I'll just tell you quickly. In 2 weeks' time, we will be speaking with, apologies for my hesitation, a book chat and a new book. So let's enjoy the next 2 weeks reading Bri's book and attending the Now Fest. Great to see you all, and have a great day.
Thank you all.
Bye now, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Louise, for that. Before you all go, guys, one small correction. The Now Fest is not a version of Nudstock. They're totally separate entities. They've got separate point of view. They come from
Excuse me, Prakash.
No worries out there. No worries. They come from separate point of views, both of them. They both are around behavioral sciences, but they talk about two different things altogether. Nudgefest is a fantastic thing, and Rory is actually a part of it, and so are a couple of the speakers who were there at Nudge. But as you can make out from the speakers list, this has got a very different flavor. It's quite mental. In fact, we're going to have people who are going to talk about hip hop music, the entire hip hop subculture, and what behavioral science has got to do with hip hop. We're going to find out soon. What behavioral science has got to do with entrepreneurs sitting out there. We'll find out too. Beyond RCTs and public policies, we're going to have entrepreneurs who made $300 million I think 3 weeks back, right? And we're going to ask them questions like, do you feel imposter syndrome too? Is it just me? Is the guy with $300 million in his bank account feeling the same questions, right? Like me. So we're going to have questions around that. We're going to talk to athletes and talk about how are they relying on motivation? Is motivation all that is there for their Olympic goal, or is it something else, right? So we're going to bring a fantastic flavor out there. And I think people are going to have a crazy time with it. It's 3 days. We got people from Australia, right? We've got people from Thailand, people from Nepal. You want to know what Nepal is doing for behavioral economies? It's not just a mountain out there. We have people from India, but then people from Pakistan too. People from Pakistan, Saudi Arabia. And it's going to blow everyone's mind because the speaker from Saudi Arabia is not a man. It's a woman who is out there doing behavioral economics. And we all are saying, wait a minute, isn't that the country where women can't drive their cars? How is a woman in charge of behavioral economics out there? We got Lebanon and Kuwait. We're going to talk about Tunisia, South Africa. Of course, there is UK, US, Canada, Netherlands. But we're going to talk about Mexico. We're going to talk about what's happening in the Caribbean, in Brazil, in Peru, in Argentina, and Colombia. So it's going to be fantastic. People who are design experts, design thinking experts, writers, PhDs, professors. Cass Sanson is there, and his topic is, I think he says, too much of everything. That's what his topic. I'm curious, what is Cass Sanson going to talk about? Say, Prakash, that's what I'm going to talk about. Too much everything. That's my topic. So it's an eclectic mix. We've got people who have just made $300 million selling of their startups. You want to know their point of view. And I think it's going to be a fantastic show. Like I told you, we have people who are going to, okay, I'm going to tell you who is it. Go out to Netflix, search for this fantastic show called Hip Hop Evolution. It's a 4-season show, and it's won Peabody Awards. It's won an international Emmy, and the writing team behind that entire show are going to come and talk about how do you create a subculture like hip hop, and what has that got to do with behavioral sciences. It'll be lovely, but I am losing my manners here, Bri. Your parents named you really well. I mean, all they missed out was brilliant. You are brilliant. It was a fantastic talk out here. People love you. And we're glad that a lot of people from Australia could join us. They keep on telling us why this step-brother treatment to us. And we're like, no, it's not that. It's just the timing zone. We have people from all over the world. Thank you so much, Melina and Louise and Bri. And everyone out here, stay safe, and we'll catch up at the NowFest on LinkedIn or on the website, both. All right? Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone. Thanks
Bye.
so much. Bye now.